So, Charlie, do you accept the View's apology?
I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. They went after our 5,000 students at our event there of high school and college kids. And look, I get attacked all the time. People say false things. I'm a public figure. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis. But look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it. We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it.
What happens when a few spoken words on live television threaten to unleash a $100 million legal tempest? It's a question that catapulted from hypothetical drama into stark reality, setting the stage for an unprecedented showdown. This wasn't just a fleeting news cycle, it was the opening salvo in a conflict with staggering financial implications.
But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it. And the reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience to The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last week.
Yeah.
At the heart of this maelstrom were conservative firebrand Charlie Kirk and his influential organisation Turning Point USA, pitted against the daytime television juggernaut, The View, with its prominent and often controversial co-host, Sunny Hostin, frequently finding herself in the eye of the storm. The battle lines were drawn almost instantly.
Charlie Kirk took issue with this depiction of his organization. Kirk maintains that Turning Point USA is not affiliated with anti-Semitism or white supremacist. In a strongly worded tweet, the 28-year-old stated, "Talking to lawyers, many think we have a strong case. You cannot smear minors as and get away with it. It impacts them for the rest of their life. Hashtag sue the View." That's when TPUSA went all in. The organization changed its profile pic on Twitter to hashtag sue the View, posted a number of tweets condemning The View and demanding an apology.
The flashpoint for this explosive confrontation involved a potent mix. A large-scale youth summit designed to galvanise young conservatives. The sudden appearance of unwelcome protesters espousing hateful ideologies. An on-air commentary that didn't just spark a debate, but ignited a potential 9-figure legal inferno. This was far more than a typical heated exchange. It was the genesis of a saga that would grip national headlines and force a reckoning with the power and responsibility of public speech.
They have nothing else to talk about. Maybe you should get the lawyer that worked on that Covington Catholic school case. What was that, a $200 million settlement? I think, Charlie, you could use the money, and your students definitely could too.
The scene was Tampa, Florida, where Turning Point USA proudly hosted its annual Student Action Summit. Thousands of enthusiastic young conservatives, a mix of high school and college students from every corner of the nation, had convened for a weekend packed with high-profile speakers, valuable networking opportunities, and fervent political engagement, aiming to showcase the vigour of the youth conservative movement.
Of The View to Turning Point USA, a war of words broke out after the conservative group was rallying the next generation of voters at its youth summit in Tampa, Florida this weekend. And the liberal panel just couldn't help themselves. The group sent a scathing cease and desist letter after hosts on The View suggested that Turning Point had embraced neo-Nazis who showed up outside the event.
However, this carefully curated atmosphere was pierced by an unexpected and deeply unwelcome intrusion. Just outside the convention centre's perimeter, a small, unaffiliated group of demonstrators materialised. Disturbingly, They were reported to be brandishing profoundly offensive symbols and shouting vile slogans directly associated with repugnant neo-Nazi ideologies.
Turning Point Conference, were in the front of out there in front of the conference with anti-Semitic slurs, and the
I think it's important that every single person that attended that Turning Point, every Republican speak up against these against the Nazi flags that were waved.
Though entirely separate from the TPUSA event itself, the mere proximity of these demonstrators was enough to light a dangerous fuse. This external disturbance swiftly became a hot topic of discussion on The View, but the ensuing on-air conversation veered into territory that Turning Point USA found not merely objectionable, but actionably defamatory, feeling their students and organisation were unfairly linked to pure hatred.
Well, on Monday, we talked about the fact that there were openly demonstrators outside the Florida Student Action Summit of the Turning Point USA group. We want to make clear that these demonstrators were gathered outside the event and that they were not invited or endorsed by Turning Point USA. A Turning Point USA spokesman said the group, quote, 100% condemns those ideologies, and said Turning Point USA security tried to remove the neo-Nazis from the area but could not because they were on public property. Also, Turning Point USA wanted us to clarify that this was a Turning Point USA summit and not a Republican Party event. So we apologize for anything we said that may have been unclear on these points.
Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA's reaction to The View's segment was nothing short of immediate and volcanic. There was no period of quiet deliberation, no discreet behind-the-scenes negotiation, at least not initially. Instead, they launched a full-scale public and legal offensive, signalling they would not let the remarks pass unchallenged.
Welcome back. In Monday's conversation about Turning Point USA, I put the young people at the conference in the same category as the protesters outside. And I don't like it when people make assumptions about me, and it's not any better when I make assumptions about other people, which I did. So, my bad. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So, the state, the U.S.
Over the weekend, Turning Point USA hosted a riveting event in Tampa, Florida called the Student Action Summit. Outside of the event were individuals waving flags and engaged in other activities. Well, on Monday's show, members of The View made a few comments about it.
The conservative group Turning Point USA has condemned the group of neo-Nazis and said they have nothing to do with the organization.
Yeah, but where was the
A formal, sharply worded cease and desist letter was rapidly dispatched to ABC, The View's parent network. This legal document was unequivocal and forceful in its demands. It called for a clear, unambiguous retraction of the statements made on air and a comprehensive public apology for what TPUSA termed a damaging smear.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sonny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding. You have Latino men, actually, voting more for him. And you have, and black men was not the story. We're not the story here because they voted almost 80% for the vice president.
Right.
Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach.
But Kirk wasn't content to let the lawyers do all the talking. Understanding the immense power of modern media dynamics, TPUSA simultaneously leveraged its considerable social media presence, launching an aggressive online campaign prominently featuring hashtags like Sue the View, designed to amplify their outrage and rally their supporters.
Your achievements. How do you like the so-called uneducated now, Sonny?
Yeah, and again, by the way, rarely do you get the answer to a question in the question. And her whole question is exactly why there was a rebellion against them.
Yes.
Listen, just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. I always differentiate between knowledge and wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach. I mean, or about...
This strategy quickly galvanized their base and placed immense public pressure on the network. At the heart of their furious argument was the profound and personal impact of the accusations, contending that The View's hosts had cast a dark, undeserved shadow over thousands of young students, potentially causing lasting damage to their reputations. With the threat of legal action now very public and very loud, the heat on ABC was becoming intense.
The point I'll say is this, is Sonny, you guys thought that abortion was going to be this like quasi-zealot religious issue. I'm pro-life. If people in the audience aren't, that's fine. What I'm saying though, what gives me promise, and I think we can all agree on this, is that there are other issues that should animate and drive our politics other than this very divisive one. And I was really encouraged by that, Megan. Very encouraged by that, Megan. Very encouraged, because the media was forcing this as an up or down vote on a referendum on a highly complicated, very emotional, very personal issue. And it turned out the American people were like, yeah, actually.
In a move that took many seasoned media observers by surprise, the network appeared to blink. The View, a show often recognised for its robust, sometimes unyielding defence of its hosts' opinions and provocative discussions, chose a markedly different tack in response to the escalating pressure. During a subsequent broadcast, a formal on-air clarification and apology were delivered, a rare and significant moment of public course correction for such a high-profile and influential programme. The statement meticulously clarified that the protesters outside the Tampa event were not invited, endorsed, or in any way affiliated with Turning Point USA. The clarification further noted that TPUSA security had, in fact, attempted to have the demonstrators removed from the vicinity, but were legally unable to do so as they were on public property. Co-host Sarah Haynes also offered a personal apology for her specific remarks. This direct acknowledgement, under the spectre of a massive legal threat, was a pivotal development, though for Kirk, the fight was apparently far from finished. Even after The View's public mea culpa, Charlie Kirk's combative stance didn't soften. He went on record to state that he and TPUSA were still seriously entertaining the possibility of a massive lawsuit, and the figure he floated was nothing short of jaw-dropping, a staggering $100 million. This wasn't just a symbolic number. It was a declaration of intent to escalate. The motivations behind such an immense financial demand are complex and likely multifaceted. Was it a genuine, albeit astronomical, calculation of reputational and financial damages they believed they had suffered? Or was it a masterfully played strategic move, designed as a powerful deterrent to silence future criticism from The View and other media outlets? Alternatively, could this 9-figure threat have been a calculated publicity masterstroke, guaranteed to keep the controversy burning in the headlines, further energize Kirk's base, and paint The View as a reckless purveyor of misinformation? The sheer audacity of the sum ensured maximum media attention. Legally, pursuing such a colossal claim, especially for a public figure like Kirk, presents an incredibly steep uphill battle. Defamation law in the US requires proving not only that the statements were false and damaging, but, crucially for public figures, that they were made with actual malice, meaning the speaker knew they were false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth, a notoriously high bar to clear. Kirk's persistence, even in the face of a public apology, strongly suggested a deeper conviction, either that the on-air statements had inflicted truly irreparable harm that no apology could mend, or that the apology itself was insufficient to fully hold the View accountable in his eyes, perhaps signalling a desire to set a broader precedent about media accountability. While the initial controversial segment involved the collective commentary of the View's panel, conservative ire and media focus often seemed to coalesce around one figure in particular, Sunny Hostin. As a vocal, legally trained co-host, renowned for her strong liberal viewpoints, Hostin has frequently become a lightning rod for criticism from the right. In the specific context of the TPUSA incident, it's plausible that Kirk and his supporters viewed Hostin as a key antagonist, embodying the media establishment they felt consistently misrepresented their views and values. Her prominence and outspokenness made her an identifiable target for their grievances. Therefore, the threatened lawsuit, with Hostin as a prominent co-host of the targeted show, could easily be interpreted by observers not just as a defence against a specific alleged smear, but as a direct and very public challenge to an influential liberal commentator, adding a deeply personal and ideological layer of conflict to an already explosive situation. This confrontation between Charlie Kirk and The View doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a stark reflection of the wider implications brewing at the volatile intersection of media, politics and law. The intense polarization of the American media environment means political commentary, especially on highly rated national platforms, walks an increasingly thin tightrope between protected free speech and potentially actionable defamation. Furthermore, this episode brings into sharp focus the growing trend some call lawfare, the strategic deployment of legal action, or even just the credible threat of it, as a potent tool in political and ideological battles. Whether Kirk genuinely intended to see a $100 million lawsuit through the courts, or was using the threat primarily as leverage, the undeniable effect was to escalate the conflict far beyond mere words. And caught squarely in the middle of this particular firestorm, as Charlie Kirk repeatedly and forcefully emphasised, were the thousands of students who attended the summit. He passionately argued they were unfairly targeted and their reputations potentially tarnished by association, facing a shadow over their futures due to words spoken on a television programme hundreds or thousands of miles away. The final chapter of this high-stakes confrontation between Turning Point USA and The View is yet to be written, the shadow of that $100 million threat still lingering. This entire episode compels us to ask challenging questions about the future of public discourse. Does it signal a new era where media outlets face monumental legal risks for on-air commentary? Or is it an extreme symptom of a deeply fractured public square, where dialogue increasingly gives way to litigation? The ultimate verdict remains pending, but its narrative already speaks volumes about the volatile intersection of media, money and power. 54-2